Okay, so here's the solution that I believe is at hand. Exactly as one of our audience members suggested, when you have negation, something is happening, something special is happening. And specifically, what I would like to propose is that the terminal node, we're running low on good markers here, we may need to have a break to procure some. When the terminal node in question, which is bringing along negation, I'm going to put negation to the right of the terminal node here. We will talk at some point about the linearization of that. But when the but this is clearly still going to be a T node. And I think last time, 2 times ago, we defined the notion of an M word. We said an M word is something that's created by the result of head movement where these things are both zero-level projections and they're contained within a zero-level projection. So that's an M word. So it seems like when we have plus author and plus participant and minus singular, those are the agreement features, and that's on a copula that is minus past. Of course, this problem doesn't arise in the past tense. You say, wasn't I. There are dialects of English that say, weren't I, but that's not specific to subject-aux inversion. Those same dialects would say, I weren't here, something like that. So it's not specific to inversion. These are colloquial dialects. Okay, don't worry if you've never heard that. Okay? But if you go to those places and want to fit in, you should talk that way. So when these features on this terminal with the same M word as negation end up somehow, that something has to happen that's going to make that pronounced as R instead of as am. So the intuition is that people who cannot say am't or amn't, and instead say aren't, have a specific rule that is somehow changing things such that this becomes the winner of the competition. And the specific thing that I'd like to propose is that there is a rule that, in this context, somehow removes this item from the competition. Now, how could we remove it from the competition? What do you think? I mean, if it's true that the exponent list, as we've talked about, is a passive list, you can't change the contents of that list. That list is that list. So if you're removing this from the competition, it's not because you've changed the list. What I'd like to propose is that, remember, we're talking about things occurring in a very derivational order, where this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. What I'd like to propose is that in between the moment that syntax is done and the process of phonologizing, of inserting exponents happens, there's a narrow window of opportunity at which other things that are specific to the morphology of particular languages happens. That is to say, many of you are familiar with what's called phonotactics. You have the fact that certain languages, certain sequences are fine, like pna is fine in ancient Greek, but is not fine in modern English. Okay? And that's because the phonotactics of English have some certain properties different from the ones of ancient Greek. Now, what I'd like to propose is that every language has its own morphotactics, has its own properties specific to what is allowed and not allowed in the morphology of that language. And that these morphotactic constraints and readjustments occur during this window of opportunity between syntax being finished and vocabulary insertion which we've talked about as the consultation of this passive list in terms of the subset principle. In between that is a narrow window of opportunity during which morphotactic readjustments may happen. Now this is new. I've not taught you about that before. I've told you that we can think of word building as being distributed across many components of the grammar. And I've said that part of it involves this formative list before syntax, and part of it involves syntax itself, and part of it involves this exponent list after syntax. And now I'm telling you there is another mini module in between syntax and the consultation of the exponent list, which is where morphotactic readjustments take place. And those are specifically done after syntax. Any questions so far? I haven't told you what's in that box yet. I've just told you that it exists.
So is that related to phonology then?
Nope. It's not at all. Not at all. I'm glad you asked because the answer is no, not at all. Unrelated to phonology. Phonology is happening after vocabulary insertion. Phonology is down here. These are things that are specific to what can constitute a well-formed word in this language, not in terms of its phonological properties, but in terms of the kinds of features and terminals that can cohabitate, and the order in which they can cohabitate. That is, what we've said is that the syntax delivers a structure. And we've said that the majority of word building is done by syntax. Not by a generative lexicon, but by syntax. Now I'm telling you that although syntax does all this word building, there are some things that are morphologies that are specific to words, some adjustments and readjustments that happen after the syntax is finished, that are specific to the morphology of words, morphotactic constraints. Okay? Good. Do you understand now? That is nothing like phonology. It's about terminals and features and the structures that are created by complex terminals, and we talked about the fact that complex terminals are put together by head movement. Certain facts about certain complex terminals may not survive into vocabulary insertion. They have to be changed around.
I was just thinking if like morphotactic rules were sort of related to phonotactics, like amment and that kind of thing, if you thought that was the reason behind it. Or...
I don't think that's the reason behind it. Although I think that, I don't think that's the reason behind it. Let's just say I don't think that's the reason behind it. We can come back to that question, but I don't think that's the reason behind it. I think that this is, that we can state the amment ban independently of phonology. Because to me, it actually doesn't smell phonological, because if it was phonological, then you could imagine that you would say amment or ant or amped, but the repair is not phonological. When we have a phonotactic problem, the repair is phonological, right? If we need to say a word like, Klingon, and we don't have tla in English, and then so we say Klingon, then, or if we need to say a word like if a speaker of a language like Japanese that doesn't have complex onsets needs to say Christmas and says kurisumasu. That's phonotactic problem with a phonotactic solution. Vowels are inserted. But here, if this were a phonological problem, why are you changing am to r? Why aren't you changing it to ham or to ammy or, why are you changing, the repair does not seem, the nature of the repair seems to be morphological and not phonological. Yes?
There are some instances of allomorphy which are determined by phonology.
Yes.
So instead of...
This is not one of them, I would claim.
But there are.
There are, and we will spend a lot of time on that.
Okay.
But this is not yet. So what's happening in this little box? Okay, what I would like to claim is that this box says specific to the dialects of English that don't like ament, and there are some that do, apparently, parts of Scotland, I believe, I've read. The speakers who do not like that have something going on in the readjustment that will not allow this combination. And what I would like to claim is that this small module after syntax and before vocabulary insertion can have particular constraints in it that say, I do not like a structure of this form. I don't like a structure that combines negation and all of these features. Just like languages can say, phonotactically, I don't like cry. Now, they might not say exactly that. They might say something more general, like I don't like any obstruent liquid sequence. Okay? But I don't like pla, for example. That's a very specific thing to English. Okay. So, the morphotactic rule says, I don't like things like this. And the way that that's fixed in English, in the dialects of English that say aren't, at least, is to delete these features. If, let's see what happens now. If we delete these features on the terminal node, after the syntax is done, now what happens to our little rule of the subset principle? Are we going to be able to insert am? No? Why not? Why not? Anybody? Why not?
It has extra features.
It's not compatible. It's got features that are a superset of what's on the terminal node. We can't insert it. So we have to insert R. Everyone understand? By saying that there is a rule here that removes some of the information that was on the terminal node, that's going to change what happens during the vocabulary insertion. So in other words, some of the information that was on that terminal node got robbed from it. Those kinds of processes, this specific one which deletes features on a terminal node, thereby making it less rich, less specific than it was, have a technical name in the theory which is called impoverishment. And the person who came up with that term was a Catalan linguist named Eulalia Bonet. And maybe the term may even be more expressive in the Catalan language. But what it means, I hope it should be clear to everybody, is that you've taken the rich structure which had been built, in this case by syntactic agreement, and gotten rid of some of it. You've impoverished it. You've taken away part of the structure. Is everyone following along? Okay. So let's formalize what that rule looks like then. What that rule is going to look like, which is going to be here, is going to say something like delete the features plus author and plus participant on a T node that is under C and forms an M word with negation. Okay? Something like that. If you have a T node under C that has a features plus author and plus participant on it, and is forming an M word with negation, I don't like such a thing. Please delete those features. And if you delete those features, suddenly when it comes time to insert phonology here, the only item compatible with that will be the elsewhere item. Is everyone following along? So we have found suddenly that a less specified exponent can win. How? Well, because the more specified exponent is irrelevant.